Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We are doing our Broken Heroes Bible study online. I didn't want us to miss out, and so we've been tracking in this series. Me and Pastor Adam have been teaching that. But today, you get the joy of adding in our student pastor, Justin Click. So Justin's going to chime in on the next part of this. So I'm excited. This is going to be good. Thanks, guys. This is different than what we've been doing. But I'm excited about this. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the book of Ruth. And so, where have we been so far, Pastor Adam?
You did Moses a couple weeks ago, and then we did Joshua. I don't know where we've been.
Don't know where we've been?
Nope, I don't know where we've been.
We've been to Joseph. We've been to Abraham. We've been to Moses.
Not Joshua.
Not Joshua. But we are doing Ruth. And so, hey, thanks for joining us, though.
Joshua,
we're glad
he was on
here.
the list. He was on the list.
He didn't make the cut. We had to cut somebody. Justin has actually been talking about Ruth this past week in some of our devotions. So he's already, we kind of jumped in on that conversation a little earlier today. So let's don't waste any more time. We'll jump right into the text, and let's just go to Ruth chapter 1, and I'll read the first portion here, first part, and we'll just kind of discuss a little bit. Ruth chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, it says, "And in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. And he and his wife and his 2 sons, the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites." I probably butchered that, but that's what they were. "From Bethlehem in Judah. And they went into the country of Moab and remained there. And Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons, and they took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they lived there for 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons or her husband." So we launch into this story, and it just devolves very quickly. It just falls apart and unravels for this family. And there's some things that I think I want us to look at. First off, just setting the context. When you look at Ruth, you can start out and it says, "In the days when the judges ruled." So this is right on the heels of the book of Judges as it falls in our Bible. This is right on the heels of the book of Judges. And what do we know about the book of Judges, guys? What did we talk about a little earlier?
It was just a time of where it was almost like judgment was being cast on the guys of that day. They were not living the way they should have been living. They were blanking in their head, I guess.
Sorry. The book of Judges is really a cycle of sin. And if you go read, there are certain phrases that stand out in the book of Judges. There's this phrase that stands out. It says, "And again, they did evil in the eyes of the Lord." And it's just like you see this almost at the beginning of every chapter. It's like, and again, the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So there's a lot of sin. They aren't really living by Torah. They're not living by the law. And so this is kind of where we're at in this life of Ruth, or in this book of Ruth, in the days of the judges. It goes on, it says, "And these were in the days of the judges, when the judges ruled, and a famine was in the land, and the man of Bethlehem." So that word Bethlehem means house of bread. And so in the place where there's supposed to be bread, there is no bread. There's a famine. And so it's kind of, I think when you look at Scripture, you have to look at the names, because names mean a lot. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about here. And we talked about a few of these names. You want to chime in here on what some of these names mean?
Yeah, I mean, they go to Moab, which Moab means waste or wasteland. Elimelech means God is my king. Naomi means pleasant. I think it's important as we look at this stuff, not just to, like he said, not just take them as people, but take their names as characters and what we can learn from God. You know, they're in a place where there is supposed to be bread. There's no bread, but they end up going to a place of waste, which is foreshadowing a lot for Ruth and Naomi right now, where they're going into a place of desolation, and how they change their names throughout the book, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, and so this country of Moab, it is to the east of Israel. It's to the east of where they were living in Bethlehem. And so if you look at the Bible, a lot of times when things from the east are not looked at as being good things, all the invading armies that sent Israel into exile, they all came from the east. And so these guys are traveling from Bethlehem. They're traveling from Judah to the east. And it's kind of a picture, and we talked about this a little earlier, it's kind of a picture of what happens in the book of Genesis with the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, they were cast out to the east. And so as you move through the story of the Bible, the children of Israel brought out of Egypt. And one of the things that God tells them to do is to build this tabernacle. And this tabernacle represents the place of God's presence in their community. And the entrance of the tabernacle face east. So every time they entered the tabernacle, they were entering the tabernacle from the east. And so this tabernacle represents basically the Garden of Eden. It represents this idea of Eden, this place of communion with God, of relationship with God. And so every time the people of God entered the tabernacle, they were coming back from their exile. And so just the direction that we find happening here in the book of Ruth, they are leaving the house of bread and they are going to the east, which is kind of this mirrored depiction of what happens in Genesis where they're being cast out. So let's continue on in this story. Let's pick up in verse 6. And it says, "And then she arose with her daughters-in-law and returned to the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. And so she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, 'Go and return each of you to her mother's house, and may the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. And the Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband.' Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, 'No, we will remain with you to your people.'" They're going to go with her. They're going to go with her to her people. And she says, but Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters." Basically, she's saying, hey, listen, if I had a child right now, would you wait for my child to grow up so that you could marry my kid? She's like, basically, it's over for me. You guys need to go back to your homes where you came from, because Naomi's in a desolate spot. What would that look like for Naomi?
I mean, Naomi being a widow and being living in a foreign land, she would have no support. She would be very low on the totem pole of importance, kind of exiled, cast out a lot of ways, especially being in a foreign land. Like I said, she would not really have any rights, not really have the privileges that the other Moabites would have. And so she wants to go back home. She wants to go back to Bethlehem, and she's encouraging her two daughter-in-laws to stay where they can get remarried and they can be at their hometown and with the family, their family, and have a life there, have a better life there, because she knows of them going back to.
She's trying to help them out, right? She's trying to do them a favor,
right.
And say, hey, listen, this is not going to look good for you.
Yeah, don't be like me, because I'm not in a good spot. You can be in a better spot.
So as we look at the story, I mean, she goes on and basically Orpah, she agrees. She says, I'll go back home, and she kisses her mother-in-law and she returns home. But this is kind of where we pick up with Ruth, and it's interesting because Ruth is who the book is named after. Ruth's not even Jewish. She's not part of this nation of Israel. And so basically, what does Ruth say here? Let's pick up right here in verse 15. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And may the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me and you." That's that's a pretty good commitment right there. I mean, if you think about what Ruth is doing, she's just basically totally casting off anything that she knew from her country, from her people, and she has committed herself to Naomi. And I think that just shows somewhat of the character of who Ruth is.
I think it shows her commitment to her son, to Naomi's son, to Ruth's husband. When she was married, her commitment to that family, even in death, she would not part from her husband's family. And I think that's very valuable and something to be admired.
Well, I think you can see that right here if you go back to verse 8, and it says, "May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt kindly with the dead and with me." So she even references that, Ruth does, or Naomi does, that you guys have been very good to my family. I appreciate that. But basically, Ruth makes her stand, and she says, "I'm not going anywhere except with you. Wherever you go, that's where I'm going to go." We pick up verse 18, and it says, "And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more." So we're getting to the end of chapter 1 here. It goes on to verse 19. It says, "And so the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, 'Is this Naomi?' And she said to them, 'Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara.'" All right, so what do we see going on here, Pastor Adam? What's this name change that we see happening?
Yeah, she changed her name to bitterness, or to bitter. I think it's important. She goes to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is not a huge city. It's kind of small, local, very farm oriented. So when she goes back, she knows everyone. It's not like they moved on with her. I know it's been 10 years plus, but she knows everyone. She knows the situations. They know her family. They probably know what's happened to her in Moab. But she comes back and she changes her name, and just pretty much it starts to tell the story of what happened while she's over in Moab.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this as they're returning home. I mean, it's kind of this overall depiction of what God wants to happen. God is a God that wants people to come back, and even what we talked about just a minute ago, where the tabernacle was even a depiction of that. That He's calling people back to relationship with Him. Every time they walked into the tabernacle, every time they came into the courts, that was something that was just supposed to remind them, hey, God is calling us back from expulsion from the garden. God is calling us back. And so this is kind of a depiction of that they're coming back. And I love the fact that it's not just Naomi, though, that's coming back. The fact that Ruth is coming back, I think that's kind of signals even a bigger picture of what God is doing. Hey, I'm not just calling, Israel back. I'm calling all my children back. And so remember, if we remember the blessing that God gave Abraham, He says, "I will bless you and you will be a blessing." And so He's not just playing favorites with Israel. He's saying, hey, this is for everybody. And so I love this depiction of what Naomi is doing. She's moving back, and she's bringing Ruth with her, this Moabite woman and this Gentile, and she gets a chance to come back too. Let's move on to chapter 2. Move on to chapter 2. And now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor. And then she said to her, Go, my daughter. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was part of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. So basically, these fields were outside of this community of Bethlehem. Boaz came out from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, The Lord be with you. Well, let's just stop right there and let's talk about what Ruth is getting ready to do. She's getting ready to go glean. What does this mean?
I mean, it means she's taking whatever the harvesters are putting in their baskets, whatever it is that's fallen out. She just wants to be able to pick that up.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically kind of getting not even the leftovers, but the stuff that just kind of falls out, and it's the overflow. She's going to get that.
This was common practice for a way they helped feed the homeless or hungry at the time, where they would let people come in and pick up the scraps so they had food to eat. A very common practice at the time.
Yeah, this was part of, if you say, what does God's economy look like? What does God's system of welfare look like? This is it. This was part of the Torah. This was part of the law. This was part of their instruction that God gave them. He says, this is what this looks like, how you provide for the poor, how you provide for the needy. They had instruction that they weren't supposed to cut corners. When I say cut corners, they weren't supposed to cut the corners of their field. And so as they were going through harvesting their field, they would leave the corners uncut so that the poor and the people who were lacking would be able to come in and have something there. Now, there is question whether this actually happened in Israel, or whether everybody did this. We see in this story that Boaz is a guy who's living the Torah. He's living the law. He is living the instruction that God has given. He's doing this. Whether everybody did this or not, I don't think that's the case. I really think we see evidence of that because if you go read the prophets, you go read the minor prophets, most of the time these are kind of the things that they're calling the people of Israel out on. They're saying, hey guys, you're not living by the instruction that God said. You are taking from the poor. You are stealing. You are robbing the poor. And it's like, how do you rob the poor? When you rob the poor is when you don't leave anything for them. And this may be a good time to kind of talk about where we're at as a nation. There is a run on toilet paper right now. And you guys, you
Is that a pun?
how are y'all doing on TV, right? I mean, we have right now, we're living in our nation, we have this run on toilet paper. Why are people doing this?
Panic. I mean, it's a panic. Everybody's thinking that it's going to run out somehow, and yeah, it is if you keep buying them when you don't need it. But that, I don't know.
It's this idea of scarcity, right? That there's not going to be enough. And that's the fear. I mean, that's part of where we're at as a nation, and it's part of the challenge that we have is that we all have maybe there's this common fear that is there going to be enough? Is there going to be enough money? Is there going to be enough resources? Is there going to be enough food? We were having this conversation just about people getting in heated arguments about picking up groceries and stuff, and this is happening right now. And the same thing happened. We're no different than what these people living in biblical times, they had this fear of, is there enough? But when you live in God's economy, God says, I want you to trust me. I want you to trust me. And part of trusting me is being generous. Because when you're generous, you're saying, God, I trust you that you're going to provide enough. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to live in scarcity. I'm not going to be overpowered by this, but I'm going to trust you that you're going to provide for me what I need. And sometimes that's easier said than done, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so, this idea of gleaning the field, this is basically God's economy. This is how God set up for the welfare system of those who were poor. So basically, Ruth gets ready to do this. She is gleaning in this guy's field. And let's just jump down a little ways here in chapter 2. Basically, Boaz, his name means in him is strength. And when it says in him is strength, it means in the Lord. So this is a guy even his name means that he trusts God. And so he takes notice of Ruth. He's like, let's see, let's pick up right here. And it says, and then Boaz, this is verse 5 of chapter 2, and then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? Hey guys, whoa, who's this lady who is hanging out at the corner of the field here? Sometimes it's interesting what you find in Scripture. So he has taken notice of Ruth. We haven't talked about what Ruth's name means. Y'all know what Ruth's name means? Don't know. I have it right here. Good thing I wrote it down. It says her name means beauty. All right, so she's living out what her name. She is a beauty. Actually, it's the definition when we looked it up. It says her name means beauty or something worth seeing. Something worth seeing. And what I love about that is I think it goes more than skin deep. I think that story of Ruth is more than, I think Boaz, what he saw, wow, she's attractive. But what really becomes attractive about her, and we've already seen this in how she treats Naomi, she's attractive in what her character and her spirit says, what her heart is. That she's a person who is committed. She's a person who's faithful. And no wonder there's an entire book of the Bible that's named after her. And we're going to see more of this come out. So let's go on. And basically, in verse 6, and the servant said, who was in charge of the reapers, and answered, she is a young Moabite woman who came here with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves of the reapers. And so she came, and she continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. She's a hard worker too. Let's skip down to verse 14. Or verse 15, I'm sorry. And it says, and when she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Do not, what's another way of saying this? Do not
harass her.
Harass her.
They said even sexually or physically.
Yeah, I mean, because that was, her being, I think you already said it, her being a person from Moab, if you're not a very good Torah or observant Israelite, and this person from Moab, you're racist basically, you would abuse her by maybe physically, maybe verbally, and just what she said, possibly even sexually. And so this was a very real danger that even Naomi later on, I think, is a worry that Naomi says. But he basically gives his instruction. He says, don't reproach her, don't harass her, don't give her a hard time. And also pull out some of the bundles for her and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. I like that. It's not even just the leftovers. It's kind of, hey, yeah, okay, you can get that. That's a half bundle, however it was. But he says, give her the good stuff. I think, when we look at this, it's a handful, and I have somebody who described it like this before. It's a handful on purpose. There's a purposeful. He says, pull out the good stuff and leave it. Pull out the good stuff and leave it. I think God does that.
And the message even says to give her special treatment.
Give her, yeah.
So, not only is he going to give her the good stuff, make sure there's plenty of her to glean from, but even treat her special.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. That's good. All right, what else do we have here? Chapter 3. Let's move on to chapter 3. So we're kind of getting the gist of the story. So far, what have we got? We've got family who left Bethlehem, moved to Moab, lost everything.
Right, and then all the key characters are now introduced. Boaz is in the story, and Naomi's just starting to really rely on Ruth, and Ruth is taking care of her mother-in-law and fulfilling the promise that she had.
So we pick up right here in chapter 3, and chapter 3 brings us to the threshing floor. Now, you guys know what a threshing floor is? I've never really seen a threshing floor. We don't really have those around here. But a threshing floor would be...
They have that in Gideon as well, the story of Gideon. A threshing floor is where they would take the kernels of the wheat and they would break them, and so the chaff would fly away, but the seed would fall down, so they can make their bread, they can make their stuff. And they normally was like an outside area where they would either take sticks and beat it or throw it up in the air and let the chaff fly away. So it's just a big open area where a lot of grain is and a lot of people are breaking the chaff from the seed.
Okay. So this is where Boaz is hanging out. They basically have a party. It's harvest. They're bringing in this crop, and they're having this celebration basically. And he has a little bit to drink. I think if you go reading through here, verse 3 says, "Wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor." This is Naomi's instruction to Ruth. And she says, "Go and make yourself look good. Take a shower, basically. And put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. And do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And then when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "I'll do everything that you said." So she said, I'm willing to go follow my mother-in-law's instructions. Now, basically what Boaz would have done after they brought this harvest in, he's going to spend a night in basically where this harvest is. That was not uncommon. The owner would go stay in their field because you got people that want to steal from you, right? And so, you basically, when you stay in the field, you're making sure that, hey, nobody's taking my stuff, nobody's taking my harvest, nobody's coming to snatch grain, and so that's where he's staying. That's why he's spending the night at the threshing floor.
So
and
basically, she proposed to him, in a sense. I mean,
yeah,
in the Message version, it says, "Lie at his feet and let him know that you are available to him for marriage."
yeah.
So she proposed to him.
And this. Uncover his feet is somewhat of a euphemism for some stuff. I'm not going to get into all that here, but it's a very intimate time where she is. You're right. She is saying, "Hey, I would like to become your bride," and it kind of surprises him, doesn't it? What does it say? It says he's startled. Let's pick up here in, let's say, verse 8 of chapter 3, and it says, "At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer.'" All right, so this idea of redeemer, you want to tell us a little bit about this? What does that mean, kinsman redeemer?
Just to fulfill a lot of the Levitical practice at the time, there was a setup in place, or a law set up in place, where if you're a widow, you had to find a relative, a brother or a cousin or something, and you got married into that family, so you could keep your husband's name going, the lineage going throughout the Bible, because as it was important back then for inheritance to be passed down through the male and everything to be passed down through the male. So it's important to keep having children and having that set up. So in the Levitical practices, they set up a kinsman redeemer, a way to keep your heritage going, even if there was a tragedy in your family.
Yeah, it's Naomi basically was destitute at that point. When her husband died and then her sons died, that didn't mean, hey, I get the inheritance. No, she's out unless there's a male family member who's able to bring her back in. So not only has she lost her family, she's lost her name.
So we see that later, because she wants to buy land that was Elimelech's land, but she can't because she's a woman. So she needs Boaz, she needs these male figures to come in to get this land, to get inheritance, so property can be done and business can be had.
Right. All right. So basically, this happens. Ruth goes, and in the short version of the story, basically Ruth goes and does this proposal of sorts, if you want to call it that, to Boaz. And what you see, and I'll let you read this in chapter 3 for yourself, they really kind of recognize each other's integrity. They recognize each other's uprightness or righteousness. And I love this, that she says, hey, you're a good guy. What you have done for me, you're a righteous man. And what he's recognized in her is far more than just her outward beauty. She has this inward beauty that says, yeah, there's a righteousness in you. for what you've done for Naomi, for what you've done to step up. You've left everything. You could have gone back to your family, but you didn't. You were faithful to Naomi. And he says, and I recognize righteousness in you. And so there's kind of this reciprocity of recognition of righteousness between these two. And so this is Boaz talking to Ruth. And now, my daughter, do not fear, for I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. See, he's recognizing her righteousness right there. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Okay, so he kind of sees, all right, there's somebody I'm not the next in line. Somebody's got the line, so we got to do this the right way. Because he's an upright guy, he's not going to circumvent. He's not going to cut corners, basically, right? In either part, whether gleaning his field or jumping in line as a kinsman redeemer, he's going to do it the right way. He says, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight and in the morning. If he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. And so let's skip down to chapter 4, because we pick up in chapter 4, and basically Boaz goes to the gates of the city, the gates of Bethlehem, and the gates are a place where business is conducted. All right, so who hangs out at the gates?
Usually beggars.
Everyone.
Everyone's a place where business, more specifically, elders, people who have authority, people who can conduct business and basically put a stamp on transactions. So he goes to the gates where the elders are going to be, and we see this in the story here. And it says, and now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer, who Boaz had spoken, came by. And so Boaz asked him, turn aside, friend. Hey, man, come sit down. Come hang out with me. Sit down here and have a cup of coffee. And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. And so they sat down. And they said to the Redeemer, Naomi has come back from the country of Moab and is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative. All right, so he's already recognized that, hey, me and you, buddy, we're relatives, and Elimelech is our relative, and she's got this parcel of land. They're selling this parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. All right, we got a guy, we got a taker, right? This other kinsman, he says, hey, I'll do it. Got land, got Naomi, got land. I'm interested in this deal. Then Boaz, he continued on, and I like to call this the Paul Harvey version, the rest of the story. He says this, he says, I'll redeem it. And then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth. Dun, dun, dun. What's the problem here?
She's a Moabite. I mean, she's not Jewish. She's unclean in a lot of ways. There's a lot of problems, stigma that would come with her being a part of that family. So
he gets the land, but he also gets the responsibility of the stigma.
He liked the good part of it, the land where he could make
it's
money.
Convenient.
Yeah,
it's convenient.
But then when he realized there was a problem with Ruth,
so he's like, oh, hold on. The day you buy the field, the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer, the person that was in line ahead of Boaz, said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. What's he worried about?
His wife.
Yeah, well, he's worried about tying up what he's already got with scandal and with the dirtiness of what this looks like with this Moabite woman. You know, and I kind of the word that came up a minute ago, convenience. This is not convenient for him. And a lot of times, our lives are not convenient. I guarantee you it wasn't convenient for Jesus to come here and to put himself on a cross and die for our sin. But that's exactly what he did. And that's why I love this story of what Boaz is doing, because it's not convenient for Boaz either. It's not convenient for him, but he realizes that it may be inconvenient, but it's the right thing.
Well, and we have no understanding that he knew about the land before he knew about Ruth. Like, he knew about Ruth first. He knew about the problem before he knew about anything good. He met Ruth. He met Naomi. He met them. He had no clue about that. Now, maybe he did. We have no scripture to back it up. But we know he met Ruth. And then later they talk about the land. So I think there's something said about he knew about the problem and he accepted it before he saw anything good.
So she is rejected again. Hey, welcome back. We don't want you either. So she's rejected again. But Boaz, being the guy that he is, he steps up and does what he said he's going to do. He says, then the Redeemer said, I can't do this. In verse 7, he says, now this was the custom for the former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. I'm going to give you my sandal. No, you don't. Y'all was about to say, are you really going to take that? All right, yeah, you're going to wash your hands. It might have corona on it. Who knows? He says, this is how we confirm a transaction. And the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal, and then Boaz said to the elders of all the people, you are witnesses. This is why the elders are there. He says, you're the witnesses to put a stamp on this transaction on this day, that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. And also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers, and that the gate of his native place, from the gate of his native place, you are witnesses this day. And so basically they have become the, what is it where you go get the stamp from, what is that called? I'm blanking out.
Oh, notary?
Yeah, notary. They have become the notary. Yeah, they have notarized this transaction. So, verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And I want to jump down because they have this child, and the book that follows right after this is what? Do we know what book follows right after this?
Samuel.
1 Samuel specifically. What does Samuel deal with? Everybody know? This transitioning of
It goes from judge to king.
Judge to king. All right, yeah, there you go. From judge to king. This moving of leadership, this moving of Israel from one form of leadership to another. But this is how the book of Ruth ends, and then right on the heels of the ending of Ruth, you have 1 Samuel. And this is not coincidence. Chapter 4, verse 18, and now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Benadab. Benadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. And Boaz fathered Obed. And Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. And there you go. That leads us, because Ruth is the great grandmother of Jesus. And that is
two more greats in there, I think.
Yeah, Ruth is extremely important
Really
to this. So I love this. Just to wrap this up, I love the fact that we're talking about broken heroes. Ruth is a hero, and she's a broken hero because they were destitute. They were women without a place, women without a name, women without an inheritance. And someone stepped up to bring them back to community, to bring them back to their name, to bring them back to sustenance, to provide for them, to bring them back to provision. This is a picture of who Jesus is for us. Jesus is that Redeemer who steps into our messy, broken situation when everybody else rejects us. Jesus steps in and says, I'll do it. I won't turn you away. You're mine. And that, my friends, is a good story. I like Ruth.
I think it's cool how it's not just a type and shadow of Jesus with Boaz and Ruth, but it's also a genealogical, connection through that. Like you said, a whole bunch of great grandmas, but like who Jesus is to us, Boaz was for Ruth.
Yeah.
So I think that's cool how it's connected. And we talked about how even the field that Ruth was gleaning from was pretty much the same field that they believed that the shepherds were at when they were approached by the angel to announce Jesus' birth. And so it's just, I mean, we talked about earlier rabbit trails, but there's just so many different cool things that tie in all together that reflect Jesus in the Old Testament. It's just cool. It's a cool.
Good stuff. It's good stuff. Thank you guys for being with us. Pastor Adam, why don't you close us out, pray for us, and we'll let you guys go.
Dear Lord, we thank you that we can come and just talk about you, Lord, and learn about you. Lord, we pray for right now for us to be diligent and be obedient to you and be faithful to our promises that we've given you. Lord, I pray that as we go about our day today and about tomorrow, Lord, that we just see you, Lord, that we are your light to this dark world, Lord, that you bring peace to everything we do. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you guys once again. Be sure to share the stream. You can check us out on Facebook. You can check us out on YouTube. Take that and share that out. Hopefully, we're going to get this tweaked out so it's better and better every week. Thank you once again. We'll see you later.